Hello, everyone. It's 9 o'clock on Monday night, 6 o'clock for our Western friends, and that means it's time for the Clown Fiesta podcast. Episode 29 is underway, brought to you by myself and JNT250. And week one of the LCS is in the books. And a lot of people are saying that we're seeing too many fiestas out there. I know that's ever so fitting to the name of our podcast. But with all seriousness, there were some pretty long games, some sloppiness, of course, which led to the discussion of, well, just how good is 2021 LCS? We had a tweet come out from Core JJ saying that 2021 LCS is worse than 2020. So I want to know your thoughts on that, J&T. Let's talk a little bit about that. Is the LCS worse this year, or are we getting a little bit ahead of ourselves?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that me personally, I love them 40-minute bangers.
Yeah, me too.
Those are
Honestly,
what
those games
we
were great.
love to see in North America. They are my favorite things to watch. It's a shit show, but it's very entertaining.
You love them and you hate them, right? Because obviously you want to see some good gameplay. Like, this is not the gameplay we want to see come the end of summer when we're going into Worlds. That's not what we're looking for. But let's be honest, these games are hella hype. Like, if you follow the viewership of the games, the viewership's at its peak when you get these long fiesta games that are going 40, 45 minutes. Like, those are the games that are really fun to watch, even if the play isn't so clean. But let's get back to what Core JJ tweeted. What do you think? Do you think he's right or do you think he's wrong?
It's really hard to say. And what I would say to Core JJ's tweet is I think it feels like his opinion is a little bit biased because of how poorly Team Liquid was performing in the spring of 2020. Maybe for Team Liquid, things were very difficult for them, and they were having a lot of difficulty like getting team synergy. Obviously, they had their issues with Broxa, and who knows, they could have been getting wrecked in scrims on repeat, and that's why their performance was so bad. And then come this year, they won the lock-in tournament, and they're saying how like worse LCS is, and I kind of feel like his opinion is a little bit biased. I feel like I would like to hear it from teams who are on opposite ends of the spectrums, like the Cloud9s, who completely ran through spring 2020, and now we're also sitting at the top of the standings and had a decent performance in the lock-in tournament. They're at the top, and then I would also maybe like to hear from some of the worst teams, like your Golden Guardians or your CLGs, even just to see like how they feel like the league is.
So you're saying that because last year Team Liquid was bad, their opponents were beating them, so he felt like, oh, the teams were better last year. And because this year Team Liquid is good, now their opponents aren't really showing them much. It's not really a challenge. And so that's why he thinks the league was better last year. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm making a bit of an assumption here, but
No, I don't think you're far off, though. I think there's definitely some validity to that.
yeah, and I
Because of
guess
how bad.
my
So go
reasoning for
ahead.
saying so is because I do think the opposite is actually true. I think so far we've had a much better quality of play in spring 2021 so early on than in spring 2020. Like, we'll get into it later, but if you take a look at some of those early matches in spring 2020 and how like one-sided like some games were specifically against the top teams, and just how terrible some of the games were between the bottom teams, it feels like, so far into this season, we're seeing that any team can actually beat any team, and the overall level of play is actually pretty decent, even from these bottom teams.
I would actually agree with that too. I think people are seeing these late game flubs and thinking that the league is bad now. But I would say the early game this year is a lot better. There's a lot more proactivity to get advantages in the early game. Whereas last year, I felt like there was a lot more just bad plays, bad setups, and teams were giving away advantages. It feels like teams are earning their advantages in the early game this year versus last year. Now, that's just my opinion. And obviously, Corey JJ, like, this is a guy everyone respects his opinion, right? So it's not to say that he's absolutely wrong. I'm sure there is something that's telling him that last year was better. I just, from a viewer standpoint, I definitely think that this year has actually been better. I just think the late game has looked a lot, maybe not worse, but has just looked bad. And I think that's why so many people think that 2020 LCS has not been great. I People need to remember just how bad and how sloppy those games were last spring. In my opinion, I think spring 2020 was hands down the worst we've ever seen the LCS. And so I was really, really caught off guard when he tweeted that out. I thought maybe he was like mixing up his words and saying that 2021 was better. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. And then I reread it. I'm like, oh, wait, he thinks the opposite. And I was really surprised at that. And I started to go back. I went to look back at like the rosters from last year. And I'm gonna throw out some names here just so people remember. This is gonna sound like I'm just hard flaming just by naming these players off, but I do need to remind people about the players that we had in the league. Okay, so here goes. So 100 Thieves had Meteos, Ryoma, and Stunt. I would say all of those players were underperforming. Meteos, not so much in spring. He was more underperforming in summer, I would say. But regardless, I think Stunt really struggled in spring. And then you had CLG, who had Ruin, was probably the worst top laner last year, I would say.
He was ruining their team, yes.
Kick W on that
Hmm.
one. Um, I need to remind people that Crown was playing for team or for CLG. Let's not forget just how bad Crown was running it down. Who else we got on here? Grig and Acadian were both of the junglers. They could not find a jungler to save their life for Dignitas. They had Hooney, who they had to let go of because he was running it down. Froggen had the worst split we had ever seen. Who else do we got? Kumo was there. Kumo actually had a decent spring though, so I don't want to like. I think Kumo looked pretty good last year in spring. Bang and Zazel were okay. Viper looked pretty bad. I think last year Viper did not have a good spring. In fact, I think he ended up getting benched for
Yeah, he
solo. I
got
think
benched
that
for
was in spring.
solo before the playoffs started, or
That
it was after their first playoff series. It was one of the two.
Yeah, that was in spring. What else? We had Dardoch on TSM. Dardoch was looking lackluster. Uh, Kabe and Biofrost weren't great, although I think Kabe got too much flack. I didn't think he was playing that bad. But
It just
anyways,
felt that like TSM gave up on Kabe once they found out that they could
yes.
somehow reacquire Doublelift. It just felt like they gave up on him, and it was pretty disappointing to see. And I'm glad that he's back in Europe, although he hasn't performed the best. But I think he's a solid player on Misfits in the LEC.
Yeah, and then just to name a few more, we had Aka in the mid lane who was getting absolutely hard flamed. Like Aka
Yikes.
was, he's one of the most flamed players in LCS history, I would say. Maybe him, Wiggly, can jockey for that. And then the last one was Keith. I'll remind people that we had Keith starting as support, and so
Dude.
this just to say like that is a long list that I just gave everyone there of players that did not look good at all last spring. And so I just want to remind people that yeah, we see some bad play right now, but those names that I just listed were pretty much bad for almost all of spring, and we're only through week 1 of spring this year. Yes, week 1 is a little bit different this year because we've already done the lock-in tournament and there was 3 games this weekend. I get that. But I just think to compare and to say that 2020 league or 2021 league is worse than last year, I don't personally think that's true, and I think that there's a little bit of recency bias there.
Yeah, for sure. Like, just you named off all the players, so I just kind of went through all the rosters and just like made just a note of if they're still playing in the LCS or not. And 26 of the 50 starting players in the LCS from spring 2020 aren't competing in the LCS anymore. And now,
Damn.
obviously, a couple of those are players who've now retired. There's been a couple who have gone back to like other regions, like Broken Blade and Kabe, who we kind of just mentioned or Kabe, who I just mentioned on TSM, but Broken Blade also went back to Europe. Um, but that pretty much leaves, just under 20 players who are no longer competing at the LCS level. And to just really like think about that for a second, like that is, what is that as a percentage of players? That's like 35% of the players in your league are no longer LCS caliber 1 year
Wait,
ago.
are we talking about the 26 or what are we talking about?
No, I'm
The
just saying,
26 number that you said?
yeah.
That's over half. There's 50
Well,
players.
but some
50
of them,
starting positions rather.
have retired and others have gone back to different regions. I'm just saying,
Okay, gotcha.
I was just saying maybe just below 20 of the players starting in the LCS in 2020 are no longer even at LCS level. And that is really
Yeah.
crazy to think about because we're only 1 year removed from that. Like that just really goes to show how poor players were performing individually and teams were performing. Because even if you look at the standings from spring of 2020, the standings were very like condensed in the middle because Cloud9 was obviously so dominant, but there was so much, back and forth between many of the teams, in the middle and in the bottom and even towards the top. Like the second best team in North America only had 10 wins on their season. They were only 10-8. They're
Yeah.
basically all the teams who weren't Cloud9, you could argue were basically 500 teams, and that is really crazy to think about.
Well, and I would also say that even Cloud9 themselves, who were 17-1 by the end of the split, smashing everyone, even said, "Yeah, looking back in hindsight, we weren't that great of a team either. We were just beating up on other bad teams." So I think even that speaks to if you go 17-1 and you're not even convinced that you're good, I think that says something as well.
For sure.
And the other thing that I'll say too is that this year, let's say that 2021 LCS is worse. It probably should be, right? This is the most, like you said, the largest turnover that we've seen in the LCS. We've seen so many players, but we're bringing in so many developmental players, and we're seeing so many developmental rosters that even if the league was worse this year, it probably should be. Even though I don't really think it is, honestly, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I'm just seeing a question in the live chat because it does relate to something that myself and Blue Jay were actually discussing yesterday. And to let everyone, the comment is basically just saying, you know, should the LCS do something about all these players who no longer have jobs, and should they potentially either expand the league to include more of these teams, or should LCS teams have veteran rosters that their teams can scrim against? And me and myself and Blue Jay were just talking the other day, and we were saying if you had to choose one between expanding the LCS, basically meaning adding two more teams, or removing two teams from the LCS, which would you do? So I'll let you go first, Blue Jay. If you had to pick an option.
Yeah.
Would you have the LCS expand and increase the number of teams by two, or decrease by two?
So me, I would actually go the decrease route, and I'll tell you why. Um, I think there's some LCS teams right now who are so low on budget, and yes, I'm talking about Golden Guardians as an example here. They're so low on budget that they can't even afford LCS level players. They literally went full development because the narrative that we were fed was Golden Guardians couldn't afford to go with a competitive LCS squad this year because they lost so much money through the NBA due to COVID. And well, if that's the case, and you like, to me, I don't mind that they have developmental players, but I think that those guys should be developing in the development leagues, like Academy or the one just beneath Academy. So for me, I don't think that having more teams is the solution, because I think now you're really spreading thin the North American talent by having two extra teams. I don't think that that does anything. I think we would just see more stomps in the LCS, and I think we see plenty of those already. But you, JNT, I believe you thought the other way, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I did say if I had to pick one, I would say increase, and I'm thinking more of like the standpoint from like a business side, I guess. I mean, obviously, do I think that reducing the number of LCS teams will improve the quality of play? Yes. But do I think that reducing the number of LCS teams would be a detriment to like the LCS brand as a whole? I would say yes. You have two less teams.
Yep.
That's two less, organizations for people to get involved with, people to be fans of. Just general like numbers for the LCS would just kind of go down. And I do think it would be very difficult, in a world where, let's say, the LCS decreased their number of teams, and then they got to a point where, okay, now it's like we have many competitive teams. Now let's like expand. Like then you'd have to expand back to 10, or you'd have to even go further than that and go to 12 teams. Like I feel like if you had to pick one, the one that's the most feasible from a business standpoint, and thinking further into the future, I would say would be to increase. But as I've just mentioned, I do think that could decrease the level of play of the league. But on the upside, I think that does actually help finding some more North American talent, because we are going to have, teams are most likely going to have a lower budget team. Like there might be more developmental teams, and we could see more star players, being produced. But at the same time, those players will eventually just get picked up by top teams anyways. So it's really hard to say.
I actually see. I disagree with. I think you said that it would be better for the business. How did you word it exactly?
Well, I don't know.
Regardless, I think it would be worse for the business, and here's why. Because I think there's already a significant drop in viewership when it's not Team Liquid, Cloud9, TSM, these kinds of teams. And I think that, let's say you increased the number of teams, you would have an even longer broadcast schedule. And now you would have even more people just waiting to see their team play. And eventually you would have people that's like, look, I don't want to wait through 3 games of teams I don't want to watch. I'm just not even going to watch the broadcast today. I don't want to wait that long to watch my team. I think that people would fall off in viewership if the broadcast was even longer. I just think there's no world in which the LCS is ready for 12 teams. But it definitely is an interesting topic. So thank you for bringing that up in the live chat.
Yeah, LCS is much better now than it was before.
Yeah, I think so
Like,
too. Um, let's move on to recapping this past weekend because it was week 1 of LCS that brought on all this discussion about whether 21 was better or 2020. Let's talk about the games themselves and let's get into how the teams are looking after week 1. Who are we going to start with, JT?
we'll start at the top of the standings. We got Cloud9. They, I would say, breezed by, or like, I don't know.
That's fair.
They breezed by the competition. In week 1, they kind of just smashed each team, but they didn't really smash Golden Guardians, but they handily beat Golden Guardians. They definitely smashed both TSM and Immortals, and BLABER is smurfing the whole fucking league or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and honestly, like, there's a reason why we put BLABER 1v9 in the title of this episode. It's because he was actually so good this weekend. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because I feel like all of Cloud9's wins this weekend were very similar. And it was, let's just play through top because their top laners are not running Flash, and it's BLABER is punishing it over and over and over again. So I thought Cloud9 looked very good, top through bottom. Like, I don't think they had anyone look bad. But I do think that it was all on the shoulders of BLABER just owning the early game, really snowballing through top lane and punishing these top laners that wouldn't bring Flash. And so it's not that it's a bad thing that Cloud9 is only winning this one way. I just think that was their win condition in every game, and they capitalized on it. And BLABER deserves so much credit for that. I think that we saw signs of spring 2020 BLABER, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. The main thing that I was really impressed by with BLABER was his early games. His pathing has been, like, I think phenomenal throughout week 1 and even the lock-in. His early game pathing is just leading to so much around the map, whether that's getting an early kill or just getting an advantage through out farming the enemy jungler and outpacing the enemy jungler. And we're even seeing just how good he is, like in like the pure 1v1. He completely shit on Xerxes in that 1v1 in their Immortals game where he got first blood, where he basically juked 4 Lilia abilities. He juked 2 bowling balls and 2 Lilia Qs in a 1v1 while he's ooming to kill Xerxes and then just run it straight top lane to get another kill, and the game was pretty much over from there.
Well, and on his Talia Qs, I don't think he missed any
Yeah,
of them.
he
Like,
didn't
when
miss
he's
one.
throwing his rocks, he did not miss one. And I want to remind people that it was against a Lilia. Lilia has a lot of movement speed. Maybe not
Yeah.
as much in the early game. I couldn't really
Well,
tell you
also
exactly, but
when you're
she's a
juking
fast
all of her
champion.
abilities, she can't move that fast. So
Yeah, like, a lot of people were flaming Xerxes for that play. I didn't think Xerxes, like, don't get me wrong, he just got outplayed, but I don't think taking the fight was bad on Xerxes' part. Like you said, BLABER was running out of mana, so he was and he needed to land everything and dodge everything to get that outplay, and he did that. So, like, huge props to BLABER. That's one where if he doesn't land everything or if he gets hit by one thing, the fight might go the other way. And I might be like, why is BLABER taking that fight without blue buff? Like, the Lilia took his blue, so she had plenty of mana, and he had no mana because he had his blue stolen. So, anyways, that play was absolutely insane, and then he just went top right away, and they snowballed by punishing the flashless top laner. And while we saw that all weekend long, Cloud9 just winning through top lane and BLABER 1v9ing. But like I said, playing through top lane, I don't think that you can only give credit to BLABER because wave management does matter in setting up these ganks. And so I think we really saw Fudge struggle in lock in, but I thought that he looked a lot better this week. And yes, I know it's mostly on the shoulders of BLABER, like I said, but hey, credit where credit's due, man. If you're setting up the lane properly to get these ganks to work, you deserve some credit for that too. And I think that that's a really good sign for Cloud9 to have to be able to play through the top lane.
yeah, I think Fudge had a really great weekend. One thing that I was really noting in our previous episode talking about the lock-in was Fudge's issues with wave management, because it was just so surprising how often he was getting waves stacked against him, either resulting in his death under tower or him having to back off and lose multiple waves the entirety of laning phase, and it was really nice to see um, his early laning and, like we just mentioned, how he sets up these waves for early top lane ganks. In the TSM game, he did a really nice bait where he was getting a wave shoved into him, and Fudge kind of takes this like fake bad trade to get Huni to step forward. Obviously, we just talked about Blabber. Blabber makes a pretty insane play where he flashes right in front of the Camille E to stop the Camille hook shot from going anywhere. They lock him down, and a lot of these games are just really over in the early game with Blabber and Fudge working together to basically do what was happening to Fudge in the lock-in tournament, where they would get waves stacked against them, they would zone the opposing top laner off, or they would just straight up kill him under his tower. And we sort of saw Fudge getting up in CS very early into these games.
And so if there is any concern with Cloud9, what would it be? Because there's nothing crazy concerning that I'm seeing right now. And yes, this was just one weekend, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. But is there anything that concerns you about the roster? Maybe that Perks doesn't really need to be involved in anything. Is that concerning or
Yeah,
hasn't been involved?
it's really hard to judge Perks still right now. Like, he just hasn't been asked to do anything. In the Cloud9 victories, they're primarily, well, in the lock-in tournament, they're playing through bot side, and in these first 3 wins, they're playing through top side. And I think just being alone in the 1v1 mid lane, I think Perks has been doing a good job, not a great job. He's not like popping off or anything. There are still some, like, I wouldn't call them issues, but he still is having some like equal to slightly losing lanes in some of these matchups. He was down, I think, early in CS on the Yone in their Immortals game. He was down, I think, about 10 or 15 CS to Insanity. Props to Insanity, I guess. And then, he had a couple deaths in his Azir game in the early game, kind of one where he missteps and, it gets Camille ulted on. Obviously, he trade kills, very nice, but I still believe there's so much room to grow with Perks, and we will see him get better.
Well, and I think some people would argue that it's a really good problem to have, like that you don't need Perks to 1v9 the game for you. That's a good that's a good problem to have,
Yeah.
right? I think most people would argue that anyways. But yeah, like it's not what we've expected out of Perks, and that's why it's a little bit like, hmm, I don't know. We should see a little bit more. And then Cloud9's bot lane has looked good. Like for me, there's nothing new to say about their bot lane. Their bot lane has looked good since the start of the year. I've seen very few mistakes out of their bot lane.
Yeah. Their bot lane wasn't the focus of their 3 games this weekend. The
Nope.
only like one misplay I can think of was in the TSM game where Sven just got like caught out mid randomly. But other than that, I guess one thing I do want to note is myself and Blue Jay, we've actually been watching the Doublelift co-stream
Hmm.
lately as opposed to watching the LCS broadcast, because we both are really liking Doublelift's co-stream in terms of like the high level insight that he gives. And one thing that he's always doing on his stream is really praising Vulcan for his roam timings and how Cloud9 actually manages the bot lane and how they utilize the support role. He talks about how one thing that Vulcan really likes to do is around level 4, they'll start to slow push a wave bottom, and then once they get the slow push in and they get the wave to bounce back, they basically just send Vulcan topside for around 1 minute, between minutes like 5 and 7, where he pretty much gets to either make a play on the map, set up vision for Rift Herald, as Cloud9 really likes to go for a lot of these early Rift Herald plays if they're not getting the early dragons. It's kind of like Cloud9 is on like either on one extreme or the other, where they want to stack early dragons, or they're going for these big Rift Herald fights. And we're seeing a lot of Vulcan getting there early, making a play either top lane or mid lane to either blow flashes or just pressure enemies off of waves. And I think Vulcan has quietly been doing a really good job.
Yeah, no, well, I would even say not even quietly. If we're looking all the way, if we're looking at this weekend, sure.
Yeah,
But
just
if we're
this
looking
weekend
all
I
the way,
was saying.
yeah, if we're looking all the way back at the year so far, he's been great from start to finish, and I couldn't agree more. I do want to talk a little bit more about the double if co-stream, but I think let's do that later. I'll throw it in the agenda here so we could talk about it a little bit later. Let's go to 100 Thieves. Let's talk a little bit about them. Because this was a team that walked away with the 3-0 as well, I believe, right? They were 3-0
Yep,
this
the
weekend.
3-0.
Maybe not as clean as Cloud9, I would say. Last week I did have 100 Thieves higher in my power rankings for how teams are looking right now. I would definitely switch that after this weekend. Not that 100 Thieves looked awful. but I definitely think Cloud9 look better. And I think that there's some things that are a little too obvious with 100 Thieves right now. Um, let's be honest, they're picking up wins, so they're looking good, but they're not the cleanest way. And I think it's very obvious that in the early game, they are diving top or bot. There's no
Hmm.
They are not the team to wait for the first Herald or the first Dragon for that team fight. They are looking to dive as soon as they can. And so I think that if people know this, that could be something that could backfire, right? And we did see them struggle with their tower dives a little bit this past weekend.
Yeah, it definitely seemed that like 100 Thieves wasn't as clean as they were looking in the lock-in tournament, and we don't exactly know if that's problems on their ends or just teams figuring them out. Because like we just mentioned, 100 Thieves is pretty black and white in what they want to do in the early game. They want to pick an aggressive lane for either top and bot, set up a slow push on a wave, and then dive that person. And we've seen a couple misplays from 100 Thieves in terms of their tower dives. I was just watching a clip before this because I didn't really watch much of the 100 Thieves versus Dignitas game, but they had to like dive top lane. They had to re-dive top lane like 2 times, and they were trying to dive Fake God early on to the game, and Fake God actually got a trade kill in return. But I do think 100 Thieves.
He's been playing dives pretty well, I must say. To give credit, like a dive needs to be pulled off properly from 100 Thieves, but I do want to give a little bit of credit for Fake God for doing just about whatever you can do when you're put in a garbage situation, right?
Yeah, Fake God played it. Like, he played it well. That one specifically hit like 2 multi-man Gragas body slams to like prevent the dive from happening. Well, it happened, but he traded 1-for-1, and when you trade 1-for-1 in a dive, it's pretty much worth for the most part, unless you're losing like some huge fucking wave. But
Yeah,
100 Thieves, they just look a little sloppy. I do think this team is still very, very good, and I think we'll see this
agreed.
team continue to improve. But one thing I want to highlight that I'm really not liking out of them is they are banning Udyr on blue side every game. If you're
And
banning,
so I'm guessing that you're saying not just in draft, like you're talking that this is more of a problem. It's not just draft. You're basically saying that it's not just that the draft is obvious, but that you don't think that. Well, actually, yeah. Just give me what you're thinking with this.
well,
Sorry, I
it's
shouldn't have cut
just
you off.
we talked specifically last episode about Udyr and how the champion is just like the most important champion in the meta right now, and the
Mhm.
same showed for week 1. Pretty much, if you got Udyr on your team, your chances to win absolutely skyrocketed. And in 2 of the games that 100 Thieves was playing blue side this week, out of their 3 games, they're banning Udyr on blue side, which I think is super, super weird. And in their one red side game, they actually gave up Udyr first pick, choosing to play the Olaf in the Udyr Olaf matchup. They did end up winning that game, but I think Svenskeren did put a lot of work in on that Udyr in the early game, and I'm really not liking how they're choosing to ban Udyr on blue side and then actually give it up the one time on red side. I mean, I don't mind giving it up when you're playing red side and choosing to play the Olaf side of the Olaf Udyr matchup, but I do think their Udyr priority is a little bit weird.
And basically, what you're saying is though is that if you're on blue side, and if you don't ban the Udyr, you're basically forcing the red team to use that as one of their bans. Correct? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
because if
Yeah.
you don't ban Udyr on blue side, it either makes the opposing team have to ban both of Olaf and Udyr, which is really bad if you're the red side team having to throw 2 bans at the 2 most OP champions in the jungle right now, or you give the blue side team their choice of Olaf versus Udyr. And obviously in the EG game, EG preferred to play Udyr over playing Olaf. Ultimately, EG did lose that game, but it's just really troll, I think, from a draft standpoint when you're not like you're not willing to first pick Udyr and you're actually wasting a ban yourself banning this champion.
Well, Udyr also really kind of shit all over closer in that game as well. Like I need to remind people that even though 100 Thieves came out on top in that game, there was a lot of advantages that came through for EG in the early game
Yeah, no, they were
through the
up like
jungle
they
matchup.
were up like 4K gold, like
Yeah, that was a
20
game that
minutes
was
in.
thrown by EG. Let's be honest. Like
Hmm.
that's a game EG should have won.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I completely agree. As far as the bot lane is concerned, though, I think the bot lane still looks good, man. I think that this 100 Thieves bot lane came into the year with a lot of hype, and I think deservedly so. I think that they're really showing up. Some mistakes here and there, but nothing crazy. And I like the aggressiveness that you get out of who he as a support. I think that he's going to be a really big part in why 100 Thieves is so successful in their early game aggression. I think who he's been fantastic.
definitely agree. I thought DeMonte actually played a lot better this week. I actually gave him my Beansoup last week for his performance against Cloud9. I thought he played pretty good. His what was it? His Syndra in their second game was really really good. He was smurfing at that one, and I think he utilized the set in their game three really really well. Bit of a blunder by Dignitas, like picking Rengar and then 100 Thieves locked in like Renekton set, and that shit just got shut down from like minute 5. So
That's a team that loves to run set. Like
yeah,
100 Thieves loves the set pick.
Hui's a great set support, and they're kind
Yeah,
of
it's a
flexing at
good
mid now.
flex.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good. I like it.
it's a really good flex pick.
The only thing that I don't like about when 100 Thieves is like locking in set is when they lock it into these like super like heavy control mages. Like they locked it into, I think it was Syndra in game 3 against Dignitas. But other times we've seen them lock in set into like Orianna or Azir, and that was in the lock-in tournament. And in both of those games, I think DeMonte was just getting like hard shit on an outscaled mid, and I prefer when they play it into like a champion where he can actually function post 15 minutes, because when he's playing against Azir or Orianna post 15 minutes as set mid lane, your champion is basically support set.
Yeah, I think they're getting the Galio banned quite a bit on
Yeah,
their. I think teams know that that's exactly what they
yeah,
want to run. And let's.
it's
I'll
getting banned
remind
against them
people
every game.
that like when you're wanting to dive, like we said, which is exactly what 100 Thieves is wanting to do. When you're wanting to dive, like the Galio pick is so good for that, and I think that that's one of the reasons why you can't hand over that pick. The only other thing that I would say with 100 Thieves is that I don't think, and I mentioned this a little bit before, but they're very telegraphed. It's pretty obvious that they're diving top or bottom, and I think that you can be aggressive and not just dive top or bot. So what that looks like is maybe forcing the first fight to be around Dragon or Rift Herald. I think that's the only other thing that they could really do, or maybe go an extremely gank heavy jungler, um, in like Pantheon or something like that. But we know Pantheon's been banned quite a bit as well, and so I just want to see them be aggressive in different ways. I don't want them to stop their aggression because I think it's what makes them a really good team.
Yeah, I mean the thing that I think a lot of the 100 Thieves players have been playing well, but when we're talking about them always wanting to dive and their plays being so telegraphed, it actually is really affecting closer like in the early game, because if teams can either prevent these dives from happening, or 100 Thieves misplays a dive, or the enemy, plays really well to attempt to stop the dive, it actually can really set your jungler behind a lot. And
Yeah.
in all three of the 100 Thieves game, closer has actually been like getting down, 20 or 30 CS in the early game, and obviously his team then plays very well to come back. I think 100 Thieves late games and their objective control has always been very good and was very good in these 3 games, but Closer has been getting behind a little bit, which is
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
bit
they're
of
a
a
team
worrying
that's
trend, maybe.
never. Yeah, a little bit though. It honestly it is a little bit because we've seen Closer. Well, I mean, last year he was one of the best junglers in the league, no doubt. This year, I don't know if I would go that far. It's still too early to say, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, he has struggled a little bit, and I'm still not concerned. I think that guy's really good. I don't think 100 Thieves will struggle for too much longer. I think that they will pick it up in the very, very near future. Um, let's hop over to EG though. I want to talk about Evil Geniuses because specifically in their game against 100 Thieves, I thought they should have won that game. And we always talk about Jizuke being that coin flip guy and being that guy to get you an advantage, but to maybe throw it later on in the game. And I think that's what happened in this game. Um, mind you, I don't think the fault is to be completely on Jizuke for the one play that he made. Because I do think that Ignar flubbed some of his engages on the Rakan, which is rare. But in that game, there was a play. I just want to remind people it was around the blue buff on red side of the map, and Jizuke is playing Azir, and he shifts sands, whatever the hell that friggin' ability is called.
Shifting
He go
sands.
Yeah, he goes over the wall and to try to scoop Demonte and I think someday as well. There's a couple things that's wrong with this play. One, there's no one that's able to follow on the other side of the wall outside of the Gnar. And two, when he goes for this play, Gnar bar is at 0. Like Gnar is not even close to Mega Gnar, so he is not ready to fight. If you're team fighting, you want Mega Gnar. You do not want miniature Gnar. You need to be able to have the Mega Gnar into the wall kind of thing to wombo them and fight. And so to me, it was very What's the word? I don't know, but he needs to have a little bit more patience in his engages. You can't be going for those plays. And even though that's what Jizuke is known for, that's how you throw games. And I think that if EG is to be a top team in the league, he needs to show a little bit more restraint in those scenarios.
Yeah, minus that one play, I do think that Jizuke has actually had a much better start to the season than he did in, uh, I guess, well, in spring, but
More in
in
summer,
2020,
honestly. I
yeah,
would say
yeah,
in
yeah,
summer.
because summer he was like super coin flip, but it seems
Spring,
that
he actually had a pretty good start, I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
and then he fell off in the middle.
yeah, he kind of fell off in the middle towards the end, and then in spring
Yeah.
he was just like super coin flippy, and that's kind of why EG made the decision to put in Golden Glue. But I think
Yeah.
Jizuke is becoming a little more consistent with his play, which I think is really good because it's clear that he is a pretty strong player individually. It's just if he can eliminate these int moments, EG I think will actually be a really good team. I was really in favor of what EG had done to their roster. The player I really want to talk about is Impact. I think Impact to EG was like the most underrated move of the offseason. Impact completely
It's paying
1v9.
off, man.
Yeah,
It is really
Impact
paying off.
completely 1v9 their game against FlyQuest. He was shitting on Licorice in Shen versus Camille from the get go. There was a lot of discussion. I think it started on Hotline League the other week where people were saying how Impact is not that great of a player because he's not a carry player and he doesn't play the carries and instead plays the counters to the carries, which can be a big problem. But when you're playing the counter matchups to these carry champions as well as you are, I don't think anybody really cares.
Um, I can't disagree with any of that. Uh, I'm really glad that he's on EG because the narrative has been that he's more free now to play what he wants. That's what he said in his interview, that he's more free to play his picks when he asks for them. And Doublelift himself also said over the weekend that he would always ask to play the counter rather than to play, I don't know, something that's more meta. And we're seeing that the coaching staff is completely fine with that. They would rather give him the counters, and we're seeing it pay off. You mentioned his Shen game. That was a 1v9 performance. That was such a good game, and I don't think you win that if you get TL's version of Impact. I think that he's just thrown on some random tank that isn't Shen, and I don't think that you get that yeah, that 1v9 performance that we got over the weekend. And we also saw him popping off in the lock-in tournament too. This is it's probably been the best acquisition for expectations.
Yeah,
Like
best
you
like
said,
value, definitely.
yes, absolutely. Like, let's be honest, there's a huge upgrade with Alfari and TL. Like, I don't get me wrong. I think that TL Alfari is better than TL Impact. But for what was expected, I think we're getting a lot more out of Impact. And so I think highlighting him makes a lot of sense because has he maybe been their best player? I would say he's
Yeah,
probably been their best player, honestly.
I would say,
Yeah. And I just wanted to make one more point
and
about
more
Jizuke. And we
deftly.
were yeah, one more point that about Jizuke though that I wanted to, because we were talking about how he needs to restrain himself a little bit. I don't want to see Jizuke play passive. That's not what I'm saying at all with him. I think you still want to see the aggressive Jizuke, but you want to see more calculated aggression. And I know that's a term that's thrown around a lot, kind of like a cliche term, but that doesn't make it any less true. You need to be a little bit more calculated in your aggression. But if he's not playing aggressive, then you don't have Jizuke anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just the
Exactly.
last thing that I wanted to say on that. Now, I was mentioning Rakan earlier and Ignar on Rakan rather, and this has been his one of his signature picks for probably the last couple of years, and he is a really good Rakan player. But this weekend, I felt like a lot of his engages were kind of flubbed. I don't know why that's happening, but that's just what happened. I still have confidence that he'll look a lot better on it as the season goes on, as the split goes on, just because we've seen him have so much success on that champion. But a lot of times he was flashing in with the Rakan ultimate to get the knockup, and he would just miss his knockup. He would get the charm, but then miss the knockup. And that's a really important part of your engage is to follow up the charm with the knockup after. And he didn't get those. And I think that was one of the reasons why EG didn't have a 3-0 weekend and lost that game. But overall, though, the team is still playing good. We talked about how Definitely looked like an upgrade in the lock-in tournament. Definitely has looked like an upgrade for sure at this point. And it's not that he's been amazing, but he's just been so much better than Bang was last year. And so I do have a lot of high hopes for Evil Geniuses. I think they will be contending for a world spot. I said that before and I'll say it again.
Yeah, I not taking anything away from Deathlead, but in that their last game of the week against Golden Guardians, he was kind of just KSing everybody. I think he finished like he had like 12 kills on Kaisa, but it felt like that he was doing not a lot in that game. But he ended with a pretty beast KDA. But I like I just said before, I think Deathlead has been another one of the best players for EG, and another person who you could actually you could put up there in terms of like best value signing of the offseason relative to expectation.
Yeah, that's actually a good point too. Yeah, EG's just that value team, man.
Yeah, true. Okay, let's move on to Team Liquid. I don't think anybody was expecting that TL would drop that first match to Immortals. Revenge. Had to get his revenge. I don't know. Like, he was popping the hell off.
Team Liquid looked a little sloppy this weekend, and I'm so surprised just because of how good they looked in lock-in. I thought they looked really, really good in lock-in for the start of a season. Like I was like, wow, like they're looking that good, and the season just started. They haven't played together that long. Like that's a really good sign. And then this week we did see some over aggression, just some random plays that made no sense. I thought their bot lane actually looked pretty bad, and tactical I thought looked probably the worst. He was getting caught out over and over again, even in some of their wins, like just like some careless positioning. Um, and to be fair, some of these times he was playing with the Tom Kench, so maybe he's thinking if I get like Blitzcrank hooked, for example, then Core JJ could use his Devour to save him. But neither of that happened, so you could blame Tactical for his positioning. You could blame Core JJ for not being ready for the Devour, but for sure you have to blame the bot lane at some point in getting picked off. Because that's something that can't be happening, and it happened over and over again. Same thing with Jensen. Jensen in his interview today with Travis Gafford even said that like he was just getting. He's like, I don't know why I was mid getting picked off in that game. I was in a spot that I would never be in. It makes no sense for me to be there. And then Core JJ uses his Tom Kench ulti to follow in to try to save him. Like that's some shit right there, man.
Yeah.
Where like one player's diving and the whole team comes in to try to save him, and then next thing you know, it's a wipe and you give up Baron. Like that's actually what we saw, and that is so not Team Liquid to do that stuff. So it was really weird to watch.
Yeah, I would say minus the Tom Kent Senna game out of Team Liquid, I still thought that Core JJ played relatively well in both of his other Thresh games. His Thresh is so insanely good, but I definitely think that Tactical had a really bad weekend. He was getting caught out a lot. His laning was still pretty good. He's been a really good laner so far in his LCS career. Hasn't been as clean, I guess, this first week in the LCS. But we talked about it a little bit early. Alfari, that guy is just like, again, I'm kind of throwing the like Immortals game out the window a little bit, but that guy is so good. Like his gangplank is so good.
Well, and that's the thing. That's why, like, when you have a bad weekend, quote unquote, and you still come out 2-1, that's what's going to happen with Team Liquid when they look bad, quote unquote, because like they're still just winning their lanes so hard for the most part. That is that it's like even if they're not playing that great later on, you're ahead to the point that it's okay to make a few mistakes. But and again, it's early, but if we start to see this at the end of spring or even at the end of summer, I'm a little bit more worried because that's stuff that shouldn't be happening. Just some careless positioning from a lot of the members. I will say that I think Santorin has slotted in very well with this team. Just reminder that last year Broxa did not fit in so well, and yes, there was visa issues with that. So I understand that Broxa came in very late. However, it's been a pretty seamless transition in the jungle, and I think Santorin, he's just a good jungler, man. Like that's what we expected to see, but we are seeing it, and so like, yeah, man, this team's going to be dangerous if they get a little bit more careful with their positioning in the late game because they're getting a bunch of advantages from the lane.
Yeah, one thing that Doublelift was saying on his co-streams was the main reason why he sort of said that he was so successful on the Season 6, Season 7 TSM, and the Season 8, Season 9 Team Liquid was that when you have laners that are just so dominant, it just makes the game so much easier to play. Because when you're getting these dominant lanes, you're getting laners who are up 20, 30, 40 CS in their positions. It just creates this natural like gold lead, that this natural gold advantage that you get, and it's just so much easier to play the game when you have all the lane pressure, extra gold in your pocket. It just makes it so much easier to play. And although, as we just mentioned, TL is making a lot of mistakes in their games, whether it's just tactical getting caught out or some slight missteps in macro, they're still just ahead in games. And regardless of their misplays, their individual like skill players are just pushing them over the edge.
Well, and I would also say that TL has been very vocal about how they want to come into this year and play a different style that they normally don't play. They want to be a lot more aggressive than usual. And so, with that, I think that could be one of the reasons why we're seeing maybe not such clean gameplay. They want to be ready for when Worlds comes around that they can play aggressive and have that be their style. Because last year at Worlds, they were known as being a slow team. And by the end of it, they were trying to play a faster pace, but if you've been playing slow all year and then you just try to pick up the pace when Worlds comes around, you're not going to be very good at that style. And so that's what I think they're trying to do is cement themselves with a new, more aggressive style so that they could be more proactive when it comes time for Worlds. And so I think that that's something that we can forgive. If we're going to forgive other teams for, like looking bad in the early parts of spring, I think that you can forgive TL for some slip ups as well, just like you would every other team. Like that's stuff that's going to happen when you're trying to find your new play style.
Yeah, I mean, again, I wouldn't be surprised if TL, you know, we get sort of this mistake sort of Team Liquid even further on into the season because they are so good. They will be, world's contenders in North America that they are able to experiment a little bit.
Yeah. And the one last thing that I want to talk about with TL specifically is Jensen in his interview today with Travis said that he was feeling a little bit burnt out, which to me was like, uh-oh. Because if you're
The season just started,
talking,
bro.
yeah, if you're talking about burnout after week 1 of the spring split, we might have some problems here. And he did mention more. He went on along to say things about how he misses the old style and being able to go and play games on stage and whatnot. So that like he just wished that things could go back to normal and he could get back in his groove to what he was used to, something along those lines. And so I do understand that when you're used to doing, I mean, he's been in the LCS what, like 6 years or something like that.
Five and
And
a
so
half.
when you're used to doing something for so long and that is your routine, and then it just changes and you're in a different environment, it just affects you, right? And so that could be it. That could be why he's feeling burnt out. However, he did also say that he thinks he has more solo queue games than anybody else in the Western leagues right now. Whether he does or not isn't important. The point is that he's playing a lot of solo queue, and well, that could be another reason that that's something else that could lean or uh, lead to burnout.
Yeah, I didn't actually catch his most recent interview with Travis, but he has said that he is, at least on compared to the players against Team Liquid, he has played double the amount of solo queue games than anybody else on that team. So it's not
Damn.
super surprising to hear that he could be feeling a little burned out. Maybe he's talking about more like playing the game as opposed to like LCS. And another thing to think about, although, is like Spring Split's only 6 weeks. So technically, if you think about it, compared to the old style of LCS, we would be moving into week 5 based on how many weeks of LCS there are. So just another thing to think about is we only have 5 more weeks of regular season before playoffs. So
Yeah.
the season is not as long.
Well, and the other thing too is that so many teams want to go to MSI. I don't even know if there is going to be an MSI this year, but I think there is. I think they're trying to make that happen. But my point being that this is a team that's contending for that spot. Like they are definitely a contender. And so if they do win, I don't think he's really going to get much of a break.
Yeah.
Maybe a small break in between spring and summer. But point being that like maybe losing could be a good thing for TL. Do I think so? Not really, but it's worth bringing up the question anyways.
Maybe that's the play. They sandbag
Yeah.
and just experiment all of spring split so they don't have to go to MSI and then take a big break and then they go try hard mode summer.
Well, I think it would also be really sad if, let's say, he is like totally burnt out, and then you have to put in a sub mid laner for MSI. That would just, yeah, I don't think that would ever happen, but that would be disaster.
Joey 2.0.
Yeah, true. Oh my god, I forgot about that. That wasn't Core JJ. That was Olay, right? Olay. What was it?
He like benched himself because
He
he
had
was
like
like,
I don't know if it was stage fright or
no, I
something
thought
like that.
he just thought he just thought he was playing bad and he was like, I'm benching myself.
Oh, is that what it was?
I don't know.
Anyways, and also someone in the live chat. Thank you, Braden, in the live chat, bringing up that he did mention that he actually didn't have a day off this week. I think it was because of like a photo shoot or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he did mention that in the interview, and that could be something that led to feeling some burnout. But let's talk about Immortals because they were the team to play against Team Liquid this week and beat them. And this was a huge upset. What a
Hmm.
game. JNT, I'll let you start us off with this one.
Yeah, we saw another Irelia versus Kennen matchup for Alfari, and another one that he gets completely ass blasted in as he got solo killed again. Well, it wasn't solo killed, but he burned Alfari's flash at like level 4, and then Jungle came up for a top lane dive where he lost 2 waves, and then Revenge makes his big brain play where their bot lane switches top lane and he sits in the top lane bush for 1 minute, and Doublelift on his coach stream was just like saying how big brain this is by Revenge to like fake that he's basing and then have their bot lane swap up, and he gets like 2 kills on their bot lane and the game is just over from there.
For me, it was really interesting to hear because in the interview after the game, he was asked about it, and he said like his thought process was that because they were running the Tom Kench Senna, and Senna being like tactical was now the support in that instance, and Core JJ was farming. He wasn't expecting tactical to be sweeping out brushes or checking the brushes or anything like that, which is something a support would normally do. So his thought process was they're not going to check this brush because the guy who's supposed to be doing that is now farming. Like Core JJ, who's normally the one to do that, who will have
Yeah,
to
I
farm
remember that
instead
now.
of. So that thought process to me is really interesting. The mind games that a player can have in the LCS, and so if we thought it was 5 head, well maybe it's 6 head because that was a really big brain play. Um, I just loved watching that game. It was so nice to see a young, unproven NA talent absolutely have a pop off game. And yes, don't get me wrong, guys. He's not the greatest top laner we've ever seen in the LCS. I don't think that he's going to be able to do that on a weekly basis, but it was so nice to see him have his moment. I just loved it. It was great. And he had a really good performance in that game.
Yeah, it was so wholesome to just see his like reactions on the player cam when he was just popping off or when the game ended, how excited he was and how happy he was in that post game interview. It was just really nice to see. Um, Brought a nice energy, I think, to the broadcast at the time.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you if TL, so I don't remember the draft order, so I could be getting this wrong, but if TL is playing against a different team, do you think they're willing to play the Kennen into the Aurelia or lock in the Kennen blind? Do you think that happens against, I don't know, who's got a really good top laner? Let's just say EG because
No,
Impact is
well,
at least a respectful top laner.
I don't think so. I don't think we'll be seeing a lot of that matchup anymore. It's like
Yeah,
the
I don't think
second
so
time. It's
either.
the second time now they've blinded Kennen to where they get just counterpicked with Aurelia. The only situation where I guess I could see it is, let's just say, for example, Team Liquid's on red side. They have yet to pick a top laner. Same with their opponent, and they target ban 2 champions for their second rotation of ban phase on top side, and then they blind Kennen and they ban like Irelia plus Jace, who might be like a counter matchup or something. That's the only
Yeah.
world where I see them picking Kennen blind, is if they can ban out the counters to it. But I don't think we'll be seeing any Kennen top blinds unless Irelia is banned from TL.
Yeah. And I completely agree. It does feel like TL was being a little bit greedy in their draft and
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Oh, this guy can't punish us," but he certainly did. But I think there's other places to look at in this roster because I think people are going to think Xerxes is a really bad jungler because he got outplayed by BLABER. I will say I don't think Xerxes had a great weekend. I still have faith that this guy's going to be a good jungler. I don't think that he's a bad jungler. I think he's the perfect guy to put into a development roster like this Immortals roster.
Mm-hmm.
He's first of all, he's just a good jungler, but he does have some veteran experience. I think that's the exact kind of guy that you want with these young players. And I think Doublelift even talked about his enthusiasm, like in his interviews. Like it doesn't seem fake. He does seem genuinely happy to be playing with this development roster. And I think you need that kind of attitude if you're going to be on a team that is probably going to struggle for their wins. With that said, even though they came out with a 1-2 weekend, I didn't think they looked that bad.
Yeah, I
The
think
Cloud9 game was just over from that one play, and I don't think that accurately spoke to what Immortals can look like throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, I it's kind of disappointing not to see that they weren't 2-1. I think they really should have won that Golden Guardians game. It kind of just felt like they didn't exactly know what to do when they had open Nexus and open inhibitors against a Twisted Fate plus
Yes.
a top laner with TP. They really were indecisive around major objectives in terms of, are we fighting this? And then if we are fighting this, how are we defending the base? It kind of just seemed that like once it passed like 30 to 35 minutes and Immortals ended up with open inhibitors and an open Nexus, they were really indecisive in terms of what they wanted to do into the game. And you even saw that on the Golden Guardian side, like how visibly frustrated they kind of were after they ended up winning that game, because on all accounts they should have lost that game.
I
Immortals
think
should be 2-1.
that was a game where you had two, like those. These are the two. I mean, there are more than two development rosters, but these are the two absolute development rosters in the league, where like these late game decisions are not something that's ingrained to someone because it's not. Well, they're just not or opportunities or situations that you find yourself in a lot of games, and so it's these kind of late game 45-minute bangers where you're apt to see poor macro, especially from young players. And I think that that's something that we saw in this game because I think Freak mentioned it after the broadcast, or after the game, excuse me, that he felt like there was nothing Immortals could really do in that scenario because Twisted Fate could just ulti behind them. Like they had all their inhibitors open, the Nexus was open, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think there was any more Nexus turrets up.
Yeah,
Maybe there was one.
they had no Nexus towers
Right.
up for a long time.
So the point for Immortals is that if you engage in a fight there, TF ports in behind you and closes out the game. Now, that is true. There is a lot of truth to that. That's what happens. However, there were times that I thought Blaze Olive was really deliberate in his TF ultis where he used them and didn't really make anything happen with them. And that is a long enough cooldown that I think you can punish it. It's not an incredibly long cooldown. Let's be honest about that. It's probably about 45 seconds to a minute in the late game, somewhere around there. Um, and he used it twice. He used it without really making anything happen. And to me, that is your opportunity as Immortals to make a fight happen. Which both times that he used it, they didn't pull the trigger, and they ended up just losing the game because they didn't take those opportunities. And that's something that I think Immortals needs to get better with.
Yeah,
Even if you have no great situations, you need to pull the trigger on something, right? You need to make something happen, or you're just going to lose the game anyways. So it's like you have to pick your poison there and go with your highest probability of winning. And even if you're likely to lose by engaging a fight there, I think you have to do it because you're just bleeding out Baron or Dragon or Elder Dragon rather. And I think that loses you the game anyways. So I still thought that even though I don't think it's like the worst thing ever, and it's a really, you're put in a tough situation, I still think there's something that Immortals lineup could have done, and I expected a little bit more out of them there.
yeah. Like the only thing that really irked me about it was that Golden Guardians was just pretty repetitive in terms of their setup and what they were trying to accomplish in the late game. And Immortals, just like you said, they just kept dancing around and didn't commit at some point. Like at some point, when the game is just so deadlocked in terms of, okay, Immortals is thinking we can't push up too far we can't push up too far out of our base because we're gonna get ported on. And Golden Guardians is thinking like we're just waiting for that moment when they step up further enough for us to just port into the base. And you saw Golden Guardians, they were just like, okay, fuck it. Like, let's just YOLO Baron. They're either going to give us Baron or we're going to port into their base. And if you look at it from the Immortal side, they also like had many opportunities to just make that decision to either YOLO Baron and hope that you can take it and get back in time to then stop the ports. Because in that sense, if you probably get Baron buff and you kill the ports or they don't even attempt to port, you probably win the game. And Immortals just never pulled that trigger in terms of, okay, we're going to make this play. We're either going to win or we're either going to lose. And they kind of just slowly lost.
Yeah, and we are being a little bit picky here because, like we said, it is a tough situation to be in. But again, you got to do something. You can't do nothing, or else you just lose anyway. So it's a tough situation they were put in. Last thing I want to highlight with this team is Destiny. I thought he had a great weekend, especially on the Blitzcrank. We talked about how Tactical was a little bit deliberate and where he was positioning, a little bit careless. Destiny was that guy punishing, man. He had some really nice Blitzcrank hooks, and I thought that he was one of the big reasons that not that they were able to get leads, but close out the game once they got those leads. I think Revenge in that game was the reason they got ahead, but I think Destiny was the reason they closed it out. He had some really nice picks that ended up leading to Barons and objectives, and so he was another guy that I thought had a really good weekend. And I think out of all the bottom tier teams, I think Immortals is probably looking like the best one to me.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Who's next?
We'll go with Dignitas. Diggy, where's Diggy? There he is.
Okay. Dignitas. I don't have much to say because look, it's not like they looked good, right? So you can't say they looked great, but I feel like they didn't give themselves chances. And I hate just harping on draft, but this was a draft diff weekend. That's how I felt, anyways. And specifically in the jungle, we saw, look, whenever you go for a non-popular pick, for example, and you lose, people are all ready to dogpile on you for making a what looks like a really bad pick. However, I just really do believe that these picks were bad, specifically the Rengar one. When he picked Rengar in the jungle, that to me made no sense. He's playing against a Talia. He's playing against what did they have? They had all tanks. They had Set, I think. Blitz,
At the time when he picked
Tom
it,
Kench.
at the time when he picked it red side fourth pick, so they had seen Talia, Renekton, and Set. So I think in a vacuum, Rengar versus Talia is a good matchup. However, you just locked in Rengar to Renekton and Set, and
Yeah,
then they also picked a Tom Kench. So whatever target Rengar
and
is
Senna.
jumping on, you are eating them and spitting them out, and Rengar's basically just going to have done 0 damage and be sitting on top of a Tom Kench. And yeah, I think in a vacuum, Rengar versus Talia is a good matchup. However, he picked it into 2 beefy tanks, and then 100 Thief ended up picking a third one.
Well, and something I tweeted out was like, I don't know who you're going to one shot in this game because let's say you do catch out the Senna or the Talia or someone, let's say you get a little bit fed, right? And you have one of these guys caught out. First of all, you have to get around Talia's rocks, which could be a problem. If you're fighting in a choke, which does happen a fair bit, you can't just open up because you might one shot yourself jumping through the Talia minefield of rocks.
Mm-hmm.
That could happen. Or someone just gets devoured, like you said, with Tom Kench. So I didn't really like that at all. I thought that draft specifically gave them one win condition, which was to pull someone with Blitzcrank. They picked the Blitzcrank, which is very good into Set and Tom Kench because his ultimate like dissolves shields, right? So I like that pick, but I felt like that was their only win condition, and that to me is a win condition that should only exist when you are way behind. Like let's say you're down 10k, that is when you are look guys, our only win condition is getting a pick with Blitzcrank. That should happen when you're 10k behind, but it felt like they started off the game with that only win condition. It was look guys, we need to pull someone with Blitzcrank, melt their shields, and then jump on them with Rengar, and that was their win condition. That's what it felt like, and I really didn't like their draft. I don't know how they were supposed to win that game with the draft.
Yeah, for me, I didn't think that, minus Fake God, I didn't think anybody played particularly well in any of their games. I thought Fake God was actually doing a really good job. We've already mentioned him before, how he had a really good game against 100 Thieves in terms of surviving the early game onslaught that 100 Thieves put on him, and also had a really good game against Team Liquid on the top lane Gragas again. I think he's playing the tank Gragas really, really well, especially up into this Renekton pick, which we saw is a very good matchup for Gragas in the lock-in tournament.
Yeah, he's been the focus of the dives, and he's been the one that's outplaying them to the best of his ability. I don't think you can play them much better. A lot of times he is trading 1-for-1. And again, you could pin that on the team having a poor dive, sure, but if there's an outplay, there takes 2 to tango kind of thing. Like you need to be able to outplay it as well to come out with an advantage, or at least a 1-for-1 trade. So credit where credit's due. I thought that he's played really well also. With that said, yeah, we need to see a little bit more. I still think this team could be better. I want to see a little bit more out of Saligo in the mid lane. I want to see Dardoch not necessarily. I don't mind new picks. There is a time for new picks. I just think you need to wait for it to make sense in your draft, and I don't think they did that. So I wasn't too big on the Mundo. I wasn't too big on the Rengar. But yeah, I still think we could see a little bit more out of Dignitas. I'm not willing to give up on them just yet.
All right, we got FlyQuest up next. I think that FlyQuest, they have potential. Let's put it like
Dude,
that.
I still don't know where the hell to put this team, man. Like I said at the start of the year that I'm having a hard time putting my finger on where I feel FlyQuest will fall, and I don't think that's changed at all. I still don't know what the like that game against TSM, don't get me wrong, like that was not the cleanest game ever, but Licorice had some really nice plays. And yes, I know Camille's broken. A lot of people are like, well, he's on the Camille and that champion's busted. Sure. But he had some pretty nice freaking plays on the Camille, man. Like he is setting up a lot of their plays. He came to ulti Power of Evil in the mid lane. He was the one that one shot Power of Evil later on when he was like on 1 HP. He res with his GA and just completely outplayed the Syndra by dodging with his flash and then re-engaging. And anyways, I thought he had a really good game there. He hasn't looked good in every game though, and that's why it's like we're seeing some inconsistency with Licorice that it's like I don't know what to think right now with him. I have no idea.
Yeah, he like smurfed on the Camille one game, and then he got absolutely shit on the next one. The main thing that I think, which is why I'm kind of a FlyQuest believer right now, is I think Jose Diodo is actually playing really well. I think he was a player that a lot of people weren't actually sure where to place in terms of his skill level in comparison to the LCS. Obviously, he came in with a ton of hype from the World's Playing stage, and he was kind of touted as one of, if not potentially the best player in the LLA. And moving over to the LCS, people weren't exactly sure if he was going to be able to compete with the top tier junglers, maybe be right under the top tier junglers, or just be this sort of middle of the pack jungler. And it kind of seems that he has that potential to be a top tier jungler, because similar to Cloud9, the majority of FlyQuest's game plan runs through Jose Diodo.
Yeah. Well, and we haven't seen him get too many leads, but again, if your laners aren't exactly popping off or even just holding their own, it's hard to turn those leads into anything. This goes back to the good old argument of it's impossible to jungle with 3 losing lanes. And while it's not true that they're always losing lane, they are losing a lot of their lanes, and so it's hard to get any advantages out of that. And so if you're going to give some fault to FlyQuest, I don't think it's fair to give it to Jose Diodo just yet. So I don't think we've seen enough yet. I think we've seen their lanes struggle. I think Palafox has been uh I don't know if AFK is fair to say, but he hasn't had a lot of impact or gotten a lot of leads himself. They're not really playing a lot of Roam style champions with him. I would like to see them, if you're going to run the Camille, try to get the Galio in his hands a little bit more often. Those kind of picks. They seem to like him on the Orianna, which, by the way, is fine. The Orianna, especially with the Rel, is good because I think that's the only champion that Diamonds looked good on so far is the Rel pick. But outside of that, I haven't seen too much out of FlyQuest that makes me really excited for this team. I thought that their bot lane looked a little bit weak in lock-in, but I think they're starting to get better. Johnson and Diamond are getting a little bit better, but I think we need to see more before I think that this team is a good team, I would say.
Yeah, FlyQuest, I think, is in the sort of Dignitas boat where we need a little more data to see where they fit.
Yeah. I honestly, again, I don't know where to put this team. I have no freaking idea. I know not at the top. Let's say that. I know they're not. I can promise you that. I know they're not the best team in the league.
Yeah, but I do think that if you look at our top teams in the league right now, we have Cloud9, EG, 100 Thieves, Team Liquid. I do think that FlyQuest can easily be that 5th place team, and if they all really get on form, could even contend against those 100 Thieves or EG kind of teams. But
maybe
I think they have a way more upside, I would say, than a lot of these other middle of the pack teams like Immortals, like Dig, like TSM.
That's a fair assessment, I would say. Yeah. Their ceiling is a lot higher. I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll move on to one of the teams I just mentioned, Golden Guardians, the other, one of the other developmental rosters. Niles is a bit of an enter. I don't know.
The thing is, he did have the one GP game where he popped off, right? He did have a good performance on the Gangplank. I think that was in the game against Immortals, right?
Yeah, he still had 5 deaths, though.
He was playing it into the... Did he have 5 deaths in that game? Didn't he play that into the... Revenge was on... the Ivern, though. Yeah. So it's like... I don't know. I can't say I know the Ivern top lane matchups all that well. I can't tell you what that's supposed to look like, but I can imagine it's not the worst thing ever to play into because GP is someone that can be really aggressive. He did hard poke out the Ivern early on and just took over the lane in the early game. Whether that's supposed to happen or not, I can't really tell you, but it's not like it's all bad for Niles, I would say. But when I'm watching Niles, though, I'm getting some Hooney vibes in that he wants to play very aggressive. and he is not thinking at all about where the jungler is. He is focused on his lane, and he wants to win his lane. And sometimes you need to be a little bit more careful and honestly communicate a little bit better with your jungler about where the enemy jungler is. So that could be something that's falling on Iconic. It could be that maybe Iconic's not tracking the jungler as good as he could be. It could be that Niles has just been a little bit careless in his lane, but people are ganking top and he's dying, and that's a very simple way to put it, but I think it's very accurate. He's dying quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it can be okay, sometimes to be over aggressive in top lane, and you really want to try to push the boundaries of that lane because you could say that it is one of the safer lanes in terms of getting ganked. I think when you're getting ganked in either mid or bot, there's a like it's more likely that ganks in mid and bot lane go like much better than they will in top lane. I think in top lane there's a lot of outplay potential with ganks, but when you die to pretty much every single gank, it's not really a good look. I remember something like Doublift again was talking about on his stream how whenever they used to play up against Phoenix, Phoenix would literally die to every single gank. He said it like in scrims and on stage. Like if you ever just sent more than one person to mid lane on Phoenix, he would always die. And so far, that's kind of the feeling that I get from Niles is anytime he's getting ganked topside, he is either at the enemy tower or he's like halfway to the enemy tower, and he just I don't know, he's just dying, man. Like
Well, and it's hard to say because you're not like the observers are not always in the top lane. But I would have to imagine that what he's doing with his wave management is probably not too good because he's always putting himself in that spot where it's frozen right in front of the enemy tower. Again, if you're not watching the whole laning phase, you can't always say for sure what's happening. But I would have to imagine that his wave management is probably not the greatest, and maybe it's just a small little tweak that he needs to fix in order to become a great top laner. I do think that it makes sense that Golden Guardians went after this guy to be a future top laner because he does play very aggressive and he plays to win. You don't want a guy that's just going to chill and hang out. I think that we're far past those days where it's okay to just be a tank top laner to the version
except
of
for
like old
Impact.
Impact. Well, I don't even think that's a thing anymore because we're seeing Impact on some really aggressive picks. Even if he is on a tank, he's playing aggressive like we saw with the Shen. But
He's a
that's neither
beast.
here nor there. Um, but anyways, yeah, I see why Golden Guardians went after this guy because he plays to win, and I know that's sometimes you're just running it down when you're playing to win. But you know what though? It's what you want though. You don't want someone passive. You want someone who's going to go out there and try to hard carry a game. You want someone that you could play to win through. He can be a win condition. It's just about finding how to do that. And that is a long process, but that's part of being a development team. And so I think that there's still some promise for this guy. Even though he's running it down in some of his lanes, I don't think it's time to give up on him by any means. And yeah, I think that Golden Guardians, um, I still think they've looked a lot better than what we expected. I know I've
For
said that
sure.
last week, and I'm gonna say it again. This is not you. This is not a free win, and that's what I thought we were gonna get. So you know,
The main player that I really want to highlight on Golden Guardians, because I think he's by far and away their best player, is Iconic. I think he is up there in terms of like his early game. I think he's
yeah.
having one of the strongest early games actually in the league. In a lot of the games where his team is dying early, he's still managing to find early kills for his team, get up in CS against the enemy jungler, and just have a relatively good game. So moving forward, like what I'd want to see from Golden Guardians is a game where their solo laners are not chain dying, because I actually think the bot lane's been doing like a solid job. They're not like getting shit on. They're not shitting on anyone. They're just there. And I want to see a game where a Blaze Olive and Niles aren't kind of like chain running it down, and Iconic is actually able to play the game, because
I
I
would
think he's a
say that the
really
bot lane.
intelligent player, and I think he actually has a lot of potential to be a good jungler in this league.
So I would say that the bot lane, maybe while they're not running it down, they're not dying. They still are losing most of their lanes. They're not really pressuring much. They're usually sitting under tower, losing plates, and down a couple of waves at 15. So even though their bot lane isn't inting, they are still losing their lanes. And so it is again, it's tough to be a jungler when you are losing lanes. And so I think that the bot lane is struggling a little bit, but I can't say I'm surprised. I don't think any of us thought that Stixay was going to be this Popoff 80 carry. We've seen him on the decline for some time. And Newbie, I mean, we don't really know much about him still. We're still learning a lot about this guy, but I don't think he's had much of a great impact on their team either. So I think the bot lane's struggling a little bit, but as you mentioned, when your solo lanes are running it down, there's not much that can be done. And I would agree with you in saying that Iconic has been their best player. I think that um, for a rookie jungler, I think that he's looked pretty damn good, honestly.
And now is the part of the show where we move on to the bad teams.
Oh boy. Okay, so
DSM,
TSM
DSM,
has,
DSM. They don't
dude,
have the chant in the studio anymore. They've lost all their damn power.
they have looked so much worse than people thought. Like, look, TSM was another one of those teams that people didn't know what to expect. They thought that there was a high ceiling. Again, myself included, thought that there was a high ceiling and low floor. I think we're seeing a lot more of that low floor than that high ceiling, though. Definitely some struggling here. Do you have? We want to bring up a clip.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
I'll pull it up now.
yeah. So there was a clip that was on Reddit and a little bit controversial.
I don't think
But
it's
there,
controversial.
well, if you look at the comments, a lot of people weren't too happy about it on the Reddit
Okay,
comments.
calm down, TSM Reddit people.
Well, I mean, that's what you're gonna get, right? When you have TSM fans, they're not gonna be happy when Freak flames one of their players. Even flame, I think it would be a little bit extreme to call it. I think he's just speaking the
He's
truth.
stating the he's stating the obvious.
Are you ready to play the clip?
yeah, I love
Okay,
this version of
go ahead.
Flame Freak.
You don't
It's
need
so
to,
good.
for just for our listeners, you don't need to see it. It's just an audio clip. So go ahead and play the clip, JNT.
Okay, Sword Art. I want to be clear about something. Sword Art has not had a good year on TSM. Okay, looking across the LCS so far this year, Spica has been the best player. I think Pee-wee's been second best. When Sword Art came in, like this was the guy who was supposed to replace Bjergsen as his dominant player that everyone's going to look to, that the team is going to be built around him. Much like Bjergsen for 6 years straight was the mid laner in the LCS, Sword Art was supposed to be the support. He has the worst KDA in the team. He has the worst kill participation on the team. He is not getting things done. He is dying and not helping things happen. Sword Art is not having a good 2021 on TSM, coming just off of a World Finals appearance. I need to see him step up. I want to see what else he can do.
Sora's got to step it up.
So I think most of what he said there is totally fair. And while here's the thing: when you're going into a game, you don't have time to get into all the specifics. So he is just bringing up some statistics, like his kill participation and things of that nature. And while I don't think kill participation is you're not painting a full picture with that, I do think that what we've seen out of his gameplay does reflect why his kill participation is bad. We saw him flash ulti. Who was it? It was a tank. I don't. Oh god, I'm not
What
remembering
game
the
was
play
this in?
now. I don't remember. That's what I'm trying to remember now. Was it against CLG? I think it was against CLG. Anyways, the point is that he's not making much happen and they are struggling in the bot lane. And one of the points that Freak brought up was that you paid $3 million for this guy. And look, I know not every player gets the same kind of flack because they're not all making $3 million, but look, it's just true. If you spend that kind of money for a player to come to your team, you would expect some sort of impact on the game, and he's having very little impact on their games. Like there's no advantages coming out of the bot lane. He's not really making much happen in the mid to late game when he's roaming on these champions like Alistar or Leona. There's just not really much happening, and I think that it's totally accurate. And if I am a TSM fan, I'm really, really worried about what we're seeing out of Sword Art. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. I'm gonna, hype up Doublelift's co-stream again because in the Cloud9 games, while he's really praising Vulcan for finding a lot of these roam timings and his ability to impact the map in the early game outside of laning phase, it's basically the complete opposite for Sword Art and how he talks about Sword Art and how he doesn't make anything happen in the early game, and anytime he's actually going for plays, it's actually detrimental to his own lane, and more often than not, his early game plays that he's attempting to make around the map either end up like nothing happens or it's a failed play. So
And he dies.
yeah,
And he's been dying a lot.
it just feels that Sword Art at this moment is actually hurting the team more than he is helping the team in multiple areas of the game because his poor laning is not helping Lost's game at all, and his poor roam timings and failed plays are hurting the rest of his team.
Well, and something else you could argue is that this is a guy that comes from Suning, right? Like that was a very aggressive team. And so I wouldn't mind if people make the argument that, look, he's just playing really aggressive. He's used to having those aggressive plays ready to go, knowing someone will follow up. So while I don't think that's the case, I wouldn't mind if someone went with that argument, but he's just not performing to the level that he should be. And I also think that um, when there was a lot of flame that's thrown towards Lost in the bot lane as well. But I actually thought that this weekend, the best performance of the weekend from TSM's side of things was his Xayah game. I thought that he actually looked really, really good on his Xayah and was one of the reasons that they had a chance to win that game. Um, I can't remember which game that was in. Was that the Cloud9 one or was it against CLG?
That was against CLG.
Okay, yeah, anyways, I thought that he was one of the reasons why they had a chance to win that game. He was absolutely great in his kiting and was dishing out a lot of damage while his teammates were dying. And so I think that it was really nice to see Lost have a good performance because, damn, he looked good on it. And we have not seen him look so good so far this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Lost in week 1 looked like the best performing player on TSM. And I would argue TSM would have had a much better chance of winning minus these Sword Art ints. Like I just mentioned before, a lot of these early game failed plays or poor roam timings that Sword Art was making was really hurting Lost's lane. And very often will we see him down early in farm, down tower platings, but we kind of saw like Lost was really able to claw his way back into these games in the mid game. He actually had a pretty decent mid game in the Cloud9 series. He was making a half decent comeback in terms of his gold relative to the enemies. And like we were just talking about his Xayah game, it was actually really, really clean. Xayah is looking like a really strong AD carry that could potentially pop up in the Kaisa misfortune levels.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight what someone said in the live chat because they're saying, especially with how bad the team looked, and I think that's a really good point because we've said time and time again, it's hard to look good when a team is looking bad. And well, that was a game where the team was looking bad, but he actually looked very good, and I think they don't win that game without him. But we also still need to talk about the top lane because even though I thought Huni looked a lot better last week or whenever it was his last week of the lock-in tournament, I don't think that Huni looked good this weekend, and I thought that his aggression just got punished a lot, specifically in the FlyQuest game. I don't think there's any world where Huni is able to perform at this level and TSM could still look good. It's looking pretty grim in the top lane, I would say.
Yeah, for me, in terms of Huni's top lane performance, I thought actually, it's, for me at least, it's kind of 50-50 between Huni and Spica in terms of the way that the game is sort of playing out. We saw in the Cloud9 versus TSM series, Huni is running the Ignite Camille top lane and BLABER's playing Taliyah jungle and they're playing against the Udyr. And we actually saw Spica path away from topside early on into the game where he has an aggressive laner in Camille who's going to want to be fighting because he's running Ignite and because he's playing a counter matchup. And Camille's best time to fight and get an advantage against Jax is in the early game by taking this Ignite. And I think it was really terrible for Spica to actually start topside in this game, full clear red side, and then go down to blue side. And we kind of just saw BLABER be like, okay, there's nobody here. I'm just going to book it on Udyr topside and get a free kill. BLABER literally full cleared his entire jungle, did crab, ran top lane, and got a kill. And by that time, Spica had only finished clearing his camps and was on the bot side scuttle crab before BLABER is resetting with an extra 400 gold in his pocket. And I would honestly say the same goes for their loss against FlyQuest. I think Spica didn't really get much done on his other Taliyah game, and we saw Jose Diodo doing the same thing that BLABER was doing, was just running around the map on Hecarim, making plays happen and getting kills for the team. And I actually think Spica was, in my opinion, Spica was TSM's worst performer this week and should be
interesting.
Should be like the best player on this team.
Come on, Sword Art though. I think Sword Art's their worst performer. Come on, no? You still think Spica was worse?
Okay, I guess I think okay. To revise, we were already like I think we were all in agreement that Sword Art was just absolutely hot trash in week 1, and I was saying like I more mean that like Spica, aside from Sword Art, is their worst player.
Yeah, that's more fair.
Sorry, I'll rephrase.
I would also say though that we mentioned with FlyQuest that it's hard to look good when your laners aren't really doing much. We're not seeing many advantages come through the top lane. We didn't see many advantages come through the bot lane, and PoE has been, well, I guess I don't want to say he's bad because it's what we expected. PoE's supposed to play slow. Like, that's not that he's supposed to, but that's how he's always been. He's been playing control mages, and he's not exactly one to play super aggressive in lane. And so you don't necessarily have that many opportunities to gank the mid lane either. And now you're without a lane that looks good to gank. So just, I want to be fair to speak of that. While I do agree he looked a lot better last year, I would say that there's not exactly that lane that you can reliably play through on a regular basis like TSM did with top lane last year. They went top lane so often and played around Broken Blade that you always had that to fall back on at the very least, and I don't think that they have that this year.
Yeah, also, PoE needs to stop experimenting with builds in LCS games. I think it's a little bit troll. He's building Leandri. He's went Manamune, Leandri's Corki in their game against Cloud9, and then he went Imperial Mandate, Rylai's Azir in their CLG game, where he was pretty much useless up until late game, where he actually finally switched up his build and had like a decent like late game against CLG. But please stop troll building in LCS games. I think that would maybe help a little bit.
So here's what I want to say about this. I'm not going to say that he's building optimally. I don't know nearly enough as Power of Evil does about the mid lane to be that opinionated on it. What I will say is that I think that he's being scapegoated a little bit too much for these builds. While they may not be the optimal builds, I don't think that's the reason they're losing games.
I don't think that's the reason they're losing. I'm just saying,
yeah,
it would probably help you if you built correctly.
And I could agree with that. However, I think that there's too many TSM fans. I've seen Reddit comments, and I know Reddit's not the most... Anyways, I've seen Reddit comments that are just hard flaming PoE, and it's like, look, if you think that's the biggest problem you have right now as a TSM fan, I think you're a little misguided because you're not getting any advantages in mid or bot, and I think that's why you're losing games. Huni's diving a Nazir that has ultimate still, and as Camille, like, that's problems. That is why you're losing games. You're going for plays that are never going to work out, and you're just giving leads to the other teams. That's why you're losing games, not because PoE went lost chapter on Corki or anything like that. While I do agree that there could be some better build paths, I just don't. I think that's secondary to their more primary issue.
Yeah, well, I think there's only one team that has more issues than TSM.
Oh boy.
And that would be, unfortunately, we hate to beat the dead horse in this series, but
we say this every episode. We say it every episode that we hate to beat the dead horse, and then we beat the dead horse. So maybe we're just liars.
I mean, maybe.
Or maybe they, you know what, they do it to themselves though.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Let's start with some good. Okay, I want to start with some positivity around CLG. Dude, as soon as I say that, how about some positive vibes about CLG? Okay.
Smoothie did look good.
Yes, Smoothie looked great, even, I would say. I thought Smoothie had a really good weekend, but what I was going to say, though, is that at least they're getting leads to throw. I mean, they're throwing leads, but at least they're getting leads. I don't think last year they were getting a lot of leads. I think they were often falling behind, and yes, when they were getting leads, they were throwing them, so that part hasn't really changed. But I would say that all three of their games this weekend, they had a chance to win. That is a good thing. However, when you have 3 opportunities to win, you need to win at least one of them.
Yeah.
They went 0-3, and it's just like these games that they're throwing, man. It's, oh my God. If you're a diehard CLG fan, this has to be the hardest thing to watch. I don't know if there's any diehard CLG fans left, honestly. But I have said time and again, I am going to cheer for CLG as much as I possibly can this year. And so I was cheering for CLG in these games. And it's like, oh my God, man. I wanted to pull my hair out.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. I'm getting so hyped. I'm like, oh my God, CLG's going to do it. They're going to beat 100 Thieves. They're going to beat TSM. Like, yeah, let's freaking go CLG. Let's pick up a win. And it's funny and sad. That's how I would put it. But another thing that I'll say too is, okay, so Finn looked pretty bad this weekend.
Finn looked really bad.
He had some pretty troll plays, but I don't know why, like, everyone's so hard on Finn, like, with like, and let's compare. I want to compare him to Broxa last year, because when Broxa was misperforming or underperforming, it was, well, look, guys, he still got to mesh with the team. There was visa issues. Why do I hear none of that with Finn? It's the same thing.
And
I know
CLG.
Yeah, but that's exactly it, though. And I don't think that it's totally fair. I think people just love dogpiling on CLG, and I know we do it every episode too, but I don't think we go out of our way to do it. I think it just ends up happening because they lose every freaking game. And so I think that Finn has looked bad, but I do think that we should cut a little bit of slack. He hasn't been in North America very long, and I do think that there is still time for him to turn it around. And yeah, that's what I have to say about Finn. I'm not ready to give up on him so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not giving up on him either. I just think he had a really bad weekend, especially in terms of
No doubt.
his late game macro, in terms of his decision making on his Camille in their TSM game, where he pretty much didn't use his teleport spell, summoner spell, for like 15-20 minutes. Anytime that TSM was forcing an objective, Finn just chose to split push as opposed to help joining the team. And it kind of just felt like in that TSM game, CLG just kept giving objective after objective, kind of putting all their eggs into the split push basket. And then when it didn't work out, it just got to a point where TSM just needs to take Elder and win the game. And that's pretty much what happened. The other person that I wanted...
Gragas was a little lackluster too, though. His Gragas was a little troll. That was against 100 Thieves, right? The Gragas game where he ulted away. He ulted away. I think it was FBI.
Oh man, that was a pretty important point in that game. It was like a fight where Griffin was playing Nocturne and had a fear about to be locked up on FBI, and he Gragas ults.
Casked him away.
Yeah, that was a little bit troll.
Yeah,
But the other player that I wanted to talk about with CLG, who had some good and some bad, was their sub mid laner RJS. I think he actually had
I felt he got scapegoated a lot as well, and I didn't think he was as bad as people would say. He got picked off a lot. Don't get me wrong; there were some crucial moments, but I agree with you that I think there was some good and bad. And I think people are too focused on the bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, he was their primary reason for losing that Dignitas game. He was really overzealous with a lot of the plays he was going for, like with his TF ports, his just overall aggression in fights. He kind of kept putting himself in harm's way. And similar in that 100 Thieves games, he got caught off on Orianna in some pretty crucial moments. It kind of just seemed that, not to flame to say he was limit testing, but he was really trying to play as aggressive as possible, especially during the late game, and teams just kind of, I think, correctly punished it. So I thought he actually had a pretty decent week individually, but it did feel that he kind of got caught up in the big moments and didn't exactly know what to do, or how to be when to be passive, when to be aggressive in these late game situations.
Well, and again, this goes back to the same argument that I gave for Finn. This is a guy that just got subbed in, right? Pobelter was benched this week, and Finn got subbed in. Why should he not get any slack? We do this with a bunch of other players that are new to the league, or they just joined a team, or XYZ, whatever. I think that it should apply to RJs as well. Slash Deus, I guess. I can still... Anyways, yeah, I didn't think that he was that bad. I think that he actually, especially with the Orianna game, was that the one where was that the comboed with the Rel?
Yeah, they were playing Rel Orianna in that game.
God, that combo's gross, by the way.
Yeah, it's
pretty
nasty.
I love seeing teams draft it. People are always so they hate seeing Orianna, and they type Boreanna in Twitch chat, but I love Orianna. I love seeing the huge shockwaves. I think those team fights are great. I don't know why everyone's all down on Orianna. I think that pick is awesome. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, I think that the slack should be given to him as well. And I will say again, I think Griffin is better than Wiggly. I think that what we've seen this year out of don't get me wrong, there's some times where he's making some plays I don't understand. For example, when he used his Nocturne ulti on the Syndra, what game was that one? I know where it was. I know it was in the top lane.
100 Thieves. Anyways, when he played Nocturne.
I think they were sieging with Baron, if I remember right. I just remember knowing for sure that there is no need to go for a play. It was a risk that was not needed. They were able to siege at that point in time.
Oh yeah, it was in top lane tier 2. He YOLO ulted into 3 people and got his GA burned and then died, and then enemy team took Baron, and the game kind of ended a little while after.
That's a risk you do not need to take, and so that to me I thought was very wow, that's what we saw out of him last year when he was Wiggly. But I still think that he's actually been okay. There's some times where I think he's not on the right side of the map. You should be at Dragon if Dragon is spawning. That's a classic. And we do see some of that stuff where he's just out of position. But I definitely think that he's gotten better. And while I still think that this team will be better with Broxa, I think that CLG is better this year than they were last year. I think that at least they had, like I said at the start of the CLG talks here, at least they had leads to throw. I mean, I know that's a really sad way of looking at it at an 0-3 weekend, but at least they had leads in the first place. And so it's not all doom and gloom for CLG. There is some potential for them to pick up some wins.
Yeah, like you said, the one thing, the benefit to CLG is that they are getting leads. It's just unfortunate that their macro in the late game is just so absolutely terrible that it's just really holding them back and they're unable to win these games. Because I think I would argue that it's actually better to be able to get leads and then throw them as opposed to your players individually just playing really terrible, like
Yeah,
a
I completely agree.
TSM, like maybe Dignitas. Because the only person I thought on Dignitas that looked decent was Fake God. I think once CLG can get their shit together, I think they'll actually be decent, because I don't think any of their players, maybe minus Finn, played bad individually. It's just they were really getting held back from their macro.
Couldn't agree more. Let's move over to our awards for the week. Popoff, Beansoup. I'll let you start us off. Go ahead.
BLABER, it's in the title. The guy was just straight up 1v9ing
He
all
was
three of
popping
Cloud9's.
off, baby.
Like, in every single game, he had at least, like, I don't know. It just felt like every single game, Cloud9 had a 2,000 to 3,000 gold lead by like 5 or 6 minutes in the game because of what he was doing. He was either getting a kill or multiple kills, or he was getting a kill and zoning players off waves, just simply out farming the enemy jungler and out pathing the enemy jungler. And then whether it was getting early Drakes or early Rift Heralds, Cloud9 was just like hella snowballing these early gold leads into just absolute stomps.
Yeah, no, it really did feel like what we saw in him in spring last year, where he was taking games over by himself. It's a really good sign for Cloud9 fans to see that happening, and also he did get Player of the Week, as you would expect. Like he had a great performance all weekend long, so I can't disagree at all. For me, I had trouble picking a pop-off award this week. I ended up going with two players. We're not supposed to, but I couldn't. I went with Revenge as one, because I was so happy seeing him. He was bouncing around in his chair. It's been a long time since I've seen someone that happy to pick up a win. And it was off the back of his performance. He was so good on the Aurelia. And I think he was probably the main reason why they won that game against Team Liquid. And like, you took down the best or second best team in the league by doing that. So huge pop-off performance for Revenge. I'm really happy. And the other one I gave it to was Smoothie. Smoothie was awesome. And last week, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, might have been 2 weeks ago, that I gave him the Beansoup award because of how useless he was on his Alistair. But this week we really saw Smoothie turn it around, and I loved to see the Rel. I loved to see the Thresh. I thought he was great on both of them. And we talked about how at least they're getting early game leads. I think that's off the back of some of his combos. He's looked great. Really, I'm so happy to see Smoothie turn it around. So yeah, I had to go with two different pop-off awards this week, Revenge and Smoothie.
All right, Beansoup. I kind of picked two Beansoups as well. Man, maybe one of mine's not really a Beansoup, but just something that I think a lot of teams are having trouble with. Firstly, we kind of just talked about it. CLG's late game. It's not good. They are, we mentioned in the TSM game, they were consistently giving up dragons. And just choosing to not fight objectives and kind of rely on this inefficient split push that was going on. And it was pretty bad to see. There was like a lot of clips of, like on the co-streams of Doublelift and LS kind of like losing their minds at like what CLG was doing in the late game. It was kind of funny.
That's a warranted thing. I don't want to harp on it too much because we just talked about CLG and we've given them a lot of slack. So let's not go too much deeper into that. It's valid. They had really bad late games. What was your other one?
My other one was just one thing I wanted to touch on that I have really not been liking actually from a lot of teams is the sort of Udyr and Olaf priorities that have been going on in drafts. Because I mentioned this before a little bit already, specifically with 100 Thieves and how they seem to either don't want to play the Udyr, or they either think Udyr's a bad champion or something like that, because they've banned Udyr on blue side 2 of the games where their opponents have like responded with Olaf bans, and they're kind of opting to play, Talia as opposed to wanting to take the Udyr, who you could argue is the best champion in the meta. But there's a lot of teams actually in the LCS that are, kind of trolling in their draft phase when it comes to Udyr and Olaf. Pretty much, I think the win rate on Udyr right now in the LCS is like, I think out of the first 15 games, Udyr, it's 100% presence in all the games. When it gets picked, I think it's like 12 games, and I think it wins in 10 of the 12 games, if I have it correct on here. I'm not sure.
And even outside of the win rate, we're just seeing how ridiculous
Yeah.
that champion is, man. You can't kill him. He runs you down from wherever. It's point and click CC. It's just it's just not fair.
Yeah,
So
but I think what I think is really, where teams are kind of going wrong with the whole Udyr Olaf priority is we're seeing teams on red side have to waste 2 bans on Udyr and Olaf because they either don't want to play the champion, they don't want to give up Udyr, and then in turn they don't want to play Olaf into it, so they have to then ban it. But one thing that I just wanted to mention real quick that I think is really smart, which is what Team Liquid is doing, is they're actually doing this really weird thing where they are banning Olaf on blue side and then forcing the Pantheon to not get banned. We've only seen Pantheon for, I think, 3 games in the LCS so far. 2 of them were in Team Liquid games, and one of them was in a Cloud9 game. But TL is doing this really creative thing where they ban Olaf on blue side, basically forcing the enemy team to either ban both of Pantheon and Udyr, or ban one, or leave both of them up. And then TL gets their pick of the litter of Pantheon and Udyr.
their next power pick.
Yeah, so I think what Team Liquid's been doing is actually really smart, but all the other teams, and again, minus Cloud9, because they're the ones just playing Udyr and smashing everybody with it. But all the other teams, they're kind of trolling a little bit with their Udyr picks, and I don't like it.
Yeah. For me, I actually went with the no flash top laners. It's not because I necessarily think it's awful to do, but like you mentioned before, the way teams are playing around, rather not playing around their top laner. If you're gonna run no flash in the top lane against Cloud9, I think, well, even they mentioned it on the analyst desk or during the cast a couple of times, I think actually, that it is a sin to not run flash against Cloud9. And yeah, we're seeing the games just get so snowballed over having no flash in the top lane. And so I think that if we're going to move forward against Cloud9, you can't run without flash, or if you're going to, you need to play around a little bit better and give some jungle attention to the top lane to be able to snowball that lane, because we're just seeing teams lose simply because they're not running a summoner spell. That shouldn't be the case, but yeah, we've harped on that enough. But that's my Beansoup award for the week.
It just feels really weird when you're getting people are running this Ignite top lane with Camille specifically, and what I feel is weird about it is they're normally running it into a pick where they're getting counterpicked. So it's a pick where they're going to get outscaled regardless, and teams are kind of opting to take Ignite for more combat power in the top lane. But what a lot of teams are then doing is they're just kind of ignoring topside. We already talked about it. I already talked about it when we were talking about TSM and how Spica kind of trolled early game by pathing top to bot when he had this Ignite Camille top lane, which got quickly punished by Cloud9. And the same sort of goes for in that Golden Guardians game, the first game, the Cloud9 Golden Guardians game, where BLABER just runs straight top lane, level 2, kills him, and then comes right back about 2 to 3 minutes later. And again, we saw the same thing in the Immortals game where BLABER just full clears, runs topside, and kills the guy. And when you're taking this, Camille with Ignite, I feel like the jungler really has to play around it because you're taking the Ignite because you want more combat power. Therefore, that should give you a better 2v2. And if you don't have it and you're just getting 1v2'd, you're going to die every single time with no flash. So it's just kind of weird to see that people are choosing to take Ignite as a remedy for getting counterpicked when you're going to get outscaled anyway, and then you're running it down. So, yeah.
We should look to see some adaptation. Even with the Camille being as strong as she is right now, you can't not expect to be punished when you're just being counterpicked and you're not playing around it properly. But anyways, let's get into week 2, because week 2 is coming up again, of course, on Friday, as always, and we got to do some predictions. So let's get into that. As right now, we see JNT is 30-12, and I'm 31-11. I feel like that just means we haven't seen too many upsets, honestly. I feel like that's a pretty good record. Not because that's anything crazy. I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back here. I think that just kind of speaks to we haven't seen too many upsets, honestly.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's get into it. I'll let you start us off.
First match on Friday, we got the 3-0 100 Thieves against 1-2 FlyQuest. I'm going to take 100 Thieves on this one. I think they'll clean up a lot of their mistakes from week 1. And while I still am on the FlyQuest bandwagon in terms of their potential, I do think that it won't be instant.
Yeah, I'm just not on the Flight Quest hype train. I just think 100 Thieves is better. Nothing much more for me to say about it. 100 Thieves for me.
Right, CLG versus Team Liquid. Team Liquid next, yes?
Team Liquid, because even if they do fall behind, they'll win. Next.
Evil Geniuses versus Cloud9. That's actually a really good match. I'm going to go with Cloud9 still, but I do think that can be a very close game, and I think we will see a very interesting jungle dynamic because with Cloud9 playing red side, I don't think they're going to get their hands on Udyr, and then therefore I don't think they're going to get their hands on Olaf either. Who knows? Maybe we'll see like Talia or Pantheon or something like that, but I think that'll be a really interesting game jungle-wise.
Well, the more important matchup to me is the top lane. I think EG is going to learn that lesson of, look, let's not run flashless into top lane. Let's not allow Cloud9 to snowball there. And Impact has just been better than Fudge altogether. And so I do think there is some ways to win that matchup. I'm still going to go with Cloud9, but let me be honest, I thought about EG. I really did.
Interesting. Next up, we have TSM versus Golden Guardians. I don't even know, man. Like,
dude, me neither.
Dude, like, I don't even know. Like, I'm just gonna go with TSM simply, even though their players.
Really, I thought you would go Golden Guardians. Like, I really thought you would.
Even though their players are just not playing well individually, that doesn't mean that they're bad individual players. Like, if you just look at it on paper, TSM are so much better individually than Golden Guardians, and for that reason, I kind of just have to go TSM.
I'm gonna go TSM as well, but I really did think you were gonna go Golden Guardians. But yeah, I'll stick with TSM also.
It might be a game day switch. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Last up we have Dignitas versus Immortals. I'm gonna go Immortals on this one, mainly because I feel like Immortals is much better than their 1-2 record showed. But yeah, I like Immortals in this one.
This past weekend, I thought they showed a lot more than Dignitas did. Although I don't think. Again, I don't want to harp too much on the draft, but again, I don't think we got to see enough out of Dignitas due to their draft, honestly. So I'm still I could change, but for now I'm going to stick with Immortals.
And then we got first game Saturday. We got FlyQuest versus CLG. I'm going FlyQuest because they're playing against CLG.
FlyQuest because if I have to cheer for CLG again, I'll just lose all my hair. Next.
So a battle of what we could see would be the last two undefeated teams in the LCS. I have a feeling
tough, man.
I know you're gonna pick, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna go with Cloud9.
I don't even know who I'm gonna pick, man.
Okay.
This is gonna be a good game. I'm excited for that one. This is a really good one. Yeah, I don't know. 100 Thieves just didn't look that great this past weekend. I'm gonna stick with Cloud9 on this one.
Damn, you rated 100 Thieves higher in his power
I know,
before, and also said that 100 Thieves would have best of one advantage against Cloud9.
I did say that, but those were power rankings going into last week. Last week, if 100 Thieves was playing Cloud9, I would take 100 Thieves. What we saw last week was not what I was expecting at all, and I do think Cloud9 looked a little bit better. So, I mean, I got to go with Cloud9, but maybe I'll change that one too. Who knows? For now, it's Cloud9 though.
Next up, we have Golden Guardians versus Dignitas. Man, we got a lot of, I feel like, close, like, kind of pick'em games here.
Yeah, but we're not really all that different on our picks so far.
Okay,
have we picked anything different?
No, I'm going to go Golden Guardians on this one.
Okay, yeah, I still want Dignitas on that one. Okay, I don't mind the pick, but I'm still going to stick with Dignitas. I don't think they troll draft next week. Let's go.
TSM versus Team Liquid. I'm going Team Liquid.
Me too.
Immortals versus EG could be a sleeper game just for the fact that, like, we
don't sleep on Immortals on that one.
Immortals I think is pretty good. I'm still gonna go EG though.
Me too. I don't have the guts to go with an upset on that one.
Next up, Team Liquid versus 100 Thieves.
Oh, two of our best teams that underperformed this past weekend. Okay, I'll go first on this one. I still don't know what the hell I want to take, but Jesus. Could they really look that bad again? Like, both teams, could they really look that bad again? I'm gonna stick with TL. I think they turn it around. I'll go Team Liquid.
I'm gonna go Team Liquid as well.
Yeah. They're just better, honestly.
Yeah.
Like
it just feels like, I don't know, 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 times, like, TL is gonna win all their lanes, and therefore I think that's just gonna win them the game.
I will take Immortals over TSM though. In the next game, I'll take, because I think Immortals has looked kind of dookie. I'll take Immortals on that one.
I'm gonna take TSM just for the fact that there's no way, like, if it comes on Sunday that TSM is playing so bad, I feel like Bjergsen is gonna like pull out the whip and start like whipping kids.
I mean,
So,
shouldn't he be doing that? Shouldn't he be doing that already?
He should. But if it's the case where like they win against Golden Guardians, but they look like dog shit, and then they're gonna get smashed by Team Liquid, because that's probably what's gonna happen. I feel like he's gonna like break, and like everyone on TSM is gonna be like, oh fuck, we gotta win. So I'm gonna pick TSM, kind of for.
I'm gonna go. I'm sticking with Immortals. I hope I don't change my mind. I don't wanna flip flop all the time. I do that too much. So I'm gonna try to stick with Immortals.
Okay, next up we have EG versus Dignitas. I'll take EG on this one.
Same.
Cloud9 versus FlyQuest. Give me Cloud9. I don't think Licorice will get his revenge, at least not yet.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Cloud9 for me, and then in the last one
This
we
is a
got Golden
banger.
Guardians and CLG.
Oh god.
Oh baby.
You have to go first.
Should I do it? I'll go CLG. I'll do it. Let's fucking go, baby. Let's go CLG.
Oh my god.
At least if I lose my hair, it'll be on Sunday. I'll have a week to grow it back.
The thing is I feel like CLG are playing better individually. Like, would I rather have RJS or Blaze Olive? Probably RJS. Would I rather have CLG's bot lane or Golden Guardian's bot lane? I'd probably take Golden Guardian's bot lane. Sorry, CLG's bot lane. However,
it's interesting that you would take RJ's over Olive.
Based on week one performance, I would take RJS. Yeah. But I'm actually gonna go with Golden Guardians. I know I kind of said it before, but I'm on the iconic hype train. I think he's actually really good. So as long as Soul, again, this might have to be like a game time decision, because if the Golden Guardian Soul lanes are running it down, I'll probably end up picking CLG on this one. But if Golden Guardians looks a little bit better, I think Iconic can run over Griffin and turn him into Wiggly.
I'm gonna stick with CLG. I'm going CLG. Let's go. Please. I hope to God I don't change that one either. CLG baby. Let's go. I'm CLG fan this year.
Man, imagine being a CLG fan.
Yeah, CLG in 2021. Let's go. Okay, let's get into the quick news.
Yeah, we got a couple quick news type things. First off, one that came out right before LCS started was that I Will Dominate is now allowed to co-stream again. He was previously not allowed to co-stream because he was removed from the LPP, the League Partner Program, and apparently LPP members are not allowed to. If you're not in the LPP, you're not allowed to co-stream.
Yeah, that was one where I remember disagreeing with their reasoning for banning him. I do disagree that Dom has been toxic, and I think that he can be a better role model in the community. But I think that their reasoning for banning him was just unjust, I would say. And so I am, even though I'm not the biggest Dom fan, I would say that I think he does deserve to be able to co-stream. So I think that's good for him.
Another stream-related piece of news was that FlyQuest is actually going to be doing some Spanish streams specifically to market Jose Diodo and kind of introduce more Spanish viewers to the LCS by making it a bit more viewer-friendly.
Yeah, to me, I think this is such a smart move and a very underrated move. I think there's too much narrow thinking in the LCS with organizations. You need to go after these niche markets. Like if you're not a Cloud9, a TL, a TSM, you need to find a way to get fans. And I think this was such a good idea and overdue, by the way. There's been people saying this for a long time. We've seen countless Hotline League takes about this, about how there should be a Spanish broadcast, and they talk about maybe doing it. I've seen Chris Greeley say before, like that they're considering it and blah, blah, blah. Look, you should be doing that. I think that this is far overdue, and I'm glad FlyQuest would be the one to do this, by the way. Mm-hmm. Really, really good on them, so I'm happy for FlyQuest.
Yeah,
let's fucking go FlyQuest.
Pretty sure like the LCS is the only like major region that doesn't stream their broadcasts in other languages. They have a ton of, like in the LCK, they have a really great English broadcast that they do with Atlas and Valdez, and I don't know the name of their new guy, sorry, but LS was formerly on it. They do a great job with the LPL in terms of an English cast. There's like I think his name is Hysterics, and there's another person whose name I don't know. Raz used to
Used
Cast
to
the
be there.
LPL.
Frosker used to be
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, and the LEC, they do a ton of different languages for their broadcast, because
Well, of
Europe, and
course, right? It's
yeah, like
Europe.
they
Yeah.
have it in like French, like they probably do it in like 15 different languages, I would assume, in the LEC.
Okay, what's next?
Next up, one thing that came out very recent before we started this was apparently Cloud9 was having some layoffs in their organization, specifically today.
Yeah. I think this is not heavily related to League of Legends, but it is still interesting nonetheless because I think, well, one, you're seeing. I think this is a repercussion to the perks thing. I mean, when you're paying that much money for perks, that could be a reason. With COVID, that could be a reason. And I believe, I don't know all of the people that got laid off, just to put that out there. I believe one of them was a manager for CSGO. And we've seen the Cloud9 CSGO team move over to Europe. And this to me is the start. Like, I think they hinted that they wanted to eventually maybe come back to North America. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that CS:GO in North America was already struggling before Valorant, and I think that with Valorant here and C9 moving over to Europe, I would be surprised if C9 has a North American CS:GO team again. Honestly,
Now to switch over to some LEC related news. So Magi Felix, aka Magifaker, is now actually going to be playing for Astralis as their new starting mid laner, as Nuke Duck is stepping down and I would assume probably just going to retire from the LEC.
I mean, Nuke Duck to me was one of the reasons why Astralis really struggled last year. I thought he looked great in spring, and I thought he looked really bad in summer. And the team itself was the same. They were a good spring team and a bad team in summer. And I think it was time for Nuke Duck. It looked like it was the end of Nuke Duck's time, at least with Astralis, aka Origin.
And last up, some pretty major news, I would say, in the LEC was during the Fnatic and G2 game. G2 experienced a ton of internet issues post 10 minutes where we saw pause come out, but it was kind of revealed after the game that the lag issues were actually really, really bad. Players were getting like packet loss on the G2 side, and while they're not using that as an excuse for their reasoning for losing the Fnatic game, it was probably a huge issue, obviously, in the game itself.
There's no way at the pro level you can't be lagging and win games, man. Like you're up against some really good players, no matter what team you're playing against. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
that's really unfortunate to hear. But the reason why this is so relevant to me is like I don't think COVID's going away anytime soon. So this could be an issue that we can see continuing, perhaps. Right? Who knows?
Yeah, one thing just to note on this, which is pretty important actually, was it was sort of revealed, Grabs posted on Twitter about this, but G2 players had the option to either play the games from their homes, which would be a more comfortable setup for the players, or go into the G2 offices. And the majority of the players elected to play from their homes as they felt it was more comfortable in terms of setup. Obviously, with the potential of having internet issues, and that sort of came out after the fact, and there was a bit of drama on Twitter in terms of Grabs was trying to come out and use that as an excuse, to which he like quickly responded and saying he's not using it as an excuse and that he's to blame for that because realistically G2 should be playing in their offices where they have the best chance for stable internet. So but I think that's going to be it for this episode.
Yeah, that is it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much to all of you that showed up in the live chat. Pretty active chat today. That's much appreciated as always. For those listening to the VOD or whatever on wherever you're listening, if you want to catch the live show, it is at 9:00 EST every Monday, 6 p.m. for our Western friends. So 6:00 PST. We love having people show up to the live show. We like seeing and using your guys' comments in the live chat if we think it's relevant to what we're talking about. So thank you so much for showing up. Do hit the subscribe button, guys. If you're listening on YouTube or even on like Spotify or any of the Anchor supported platforms, do make sure that you're subscribed to us. We love having you guys. We think our viewership has been great. We're really happy. We get a lot of viewers come back time and time again, and we're starting to see some familiar faces. So we thank you all for that. Anything else you want to shout out, J&T, before we close her out?
Closer. SKT closer. Or T1
Okay.
closer. The
All right.
faker, the faker, the next faker of the LCK. T1
Okay,
closer.
okay. Thanks again, guys. This has been episode 29 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. We will see you guys next week.